Hello, my name is Brandon Lundberg, and I'm going to be presenting my senior project for the fall 2015 semester. The goal of the project was to create a database and website where I can display stats, rosters, and schedules to players throughout the league. This is really my first time using databases and websites, and I really think that I picked up quite a few tools that I can use for further development. I'm going to begin the presentation by explaining the database design, and then I'm going to get into the details of the website. For my database design, I use MySQL Workbench. My database has 31 tables in all, with most of them containing foreign key relationships, and I really spent a good amount of time putting together the database so that I wasn't going to have to go back and make any changes as I was doing the web development. Displayed on the screen right now is an EER diagram of the database, and as you can see, it shows a lot of the foreign key relationships between the tables. I haven't had a lot of practice with database design in the past, so I just tried to account for any cases that I thought might come up in the future. And during the web development phase of the project, I really didn't run into any situations where my database was not set up in the right way. I did have to make a couple changes to a couple tables, but overall I was pleased with the database. I began designing the database in late July, and I probably spent about 2 months really optimizing it in the best way that I could, and at one point I felt that I really needed to move on to the website portion, because although I could keep optimizing the database, I just knew that I was going to need a lot more time to work on the website portion of it, because I had even less experience there. In early to mid-September, I began the web development portion of the project, and I began that web development using Yesod, which is a Haskell web framework, and I was having problems finding solid documentation to get me through that, so I moved on to Node.js, which is a client and server-side framework, and it really just helped me because I was able to use the same resources to help me get through all of the web development subjects that I wasn't really familiar with. One of the most important parts of the project was giving myself a way to interact with the database, so I didn't have to write insert and update statements anytime that I wanted to change any of the data. So just to give you an example of how I can interact with the database here, for each one of these tables I have 3 options. I can create, edit, or delete an entity from a table. So teams happens to be the shortest form, so I'll use this as an example. So for team name, I can type in new team, and the status for the team is by default set to active, so I can save those changes there. And as I refresh the page, I can come back down to the bottom of my table here, and I can see that I have a new team. And I can also come in and edit the team, so I can change the team to team 2. And as I refresh the page, I can come down and see that my team has changed its name from new team to new team 2. And I can also delete the team and come back to the same table and see that the team has been deleted. Some of the other forms were a little bit more complicated, and they took a little bit more time to implement. For example, the players form here has multiple types of information that I would need to insert, and these would span over multiple tables in the database. For example, we have location, phones, emails, and then also just basic player information here. And that wraps up the admin section. The rest of the website was a lot more straightforward. I wasn't inserting any data, I was just pulling data directly from the database. So for example, here on the home page, you can see that I have a list of the most recent games and their scores here, as well as standings for the league as a whole. In the roster page here, I have each position for my team broken down into categories and all of the information that we have on those players. The schedule here was one of the more difficult pieces of information needed, where for each one of these games I created a box score of the batting stats for our team, as well as totals, totals on hits, and like I said, these were a lot more straightforward than the inserts, but I really think this is kind of the core of what the website is going to deliver, because this is what all of the users are seeing, as they're obviously not going to see anything in the admin section of the page. But this is where I'm going to have the opportunity to deliver more dynamic statistics to the users, and hopefully we can use it to give our team a little bit of an advantage. Also in the stats page here, just an overall breakdown of the season as a whole. That about wraps up the actual project implementation and everything that I have to show for the project, but I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the problems that I ran into throughout the semester. The first big problem I had was trying to implement Haskell's Yesod web framework, and that took up quite a bit of time that I could have used to maybe go into a little bit more formatting visuals of the website, which I would have liked to get into, but that wasn't as high as a priority as obviously implementing the real work on the database and interacting with the database. Another small problem I ran into was understanding the difference between server side and client side on the website and interacting between the two. And I think that if I would have used two different frameworks, it might have been easier to tell the difference between the two, but it may have taken longer to actually learn how to interact. But since I was able to find all the resources in the same place with Node, I think it actually ended up saving me a little bit of time, so I'm glad I made the decision to stick with Node. Although I was really happy with the final outcome of the project, I wish I could have had a little bit more time to come up with some visual representations of the type of statistics that I can hold in the database, and which can actually show some more in-depth analysis beyond just the basic baseball statistics that I'm displaying now. That's the end of my presentation for my senior project. Thank you for watching. Or other type of visualizations that can really show off what the final version of the database can do. Across that